I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. Andrew Kuo takes no days off. Hello, Andrew Kuo.
The anti-Kawhi Ben. I want it more.
You want it more. You don't get load management. You just absorb a heavier load when Jordan is on vacation.
That's right. I feel like I've opened up a lot of shows being like, I just want it more. Do I want it more? If I say it, does it make it true?
The only way for people to know that you want it more is if you tell them that you want it more.
That's right.
It's not based on anything except for results and a public declaration of wanting it more. And conversely, if you lose, you then have to say that your opponent wanted it more and that you, of course, wanted it less.
And when you get knocked down, you just get back up.
Unless, of course, you don't want it enough. And then you stay down unconscious and bleeding out of your ear with one of your feet twitching. Because you don't want it enough.
Sounds like you ran into Zaza Pachulia.
I hate running into Zaza Pachulia.
So does Kawhi Leonard.
One of my least favorite people to run aground of.
You cursed him. He's out of the league now. Out the league.
I've said many. He might still be in the league, but I've said many mean things about Zaza because he is so dirty. But I interviewed him and I liked him. He was a amiable Georgian from Tbilisi, but he was definitely from the Republic of Georgia.
This happens to you a lot.
The ATL.
You meet these guys that you have spoken ill will of on this podcast, and you end up liking them, like RJ Barrett.
However, in the case of Zaza, I spoke with him, liked him, and then spoke ill of him.
Wow.
So, to be clear, it was the other way around. I still think he was a nice guy. I just think he was a dirty player who did Kawhi Leonard dirty.
But then you pulled a Kawhi Leonard and murdered Zaza Pachulia after helping them.
So it goes. The
cycle of NBA life.
Build and destroy. What's going on? How are you eating at any interesting noodle factories around the East Village? Anything going on with you?
I have like a running checklist constantly on Post-its. Late at night, I have like my routine before I go to bed. And it's usually just checking out restaurants that I might eat the next day. And I have a list, and it's a long list of Chinese restaurants that just opened up. But I've been trying to eat at home because I don't want to eat that much meat, Ben.
Okay, so before we get into your new Jaleel Okaforian vegan lifestyle, plant-based Kuo,
Okaforian.
Okaforian? What are your resources on tracking down these new Chinese restaurants that are opening up and creating said list? Because I never know any good new spots that are like little places because I don't look for them. I don't have a routine of searching them out via numerous media channels or however you're doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, how are you putting together this list of new spots?
Mostly it's these great websites like Grub Street, Eater, New York. I also walk around and like take photos of places that are about to open, like on Grand Street. The New York Times just ran a review of a seafood spot on Grand Street I want to try when I'm ready to eat more seafood. And it's that, and there's all the blogs that are still kind of on the low active, and Instagram. It's sort of like when I do that ridiculous cat Instagram account, like where do I get my images? I'm like everywhere except my own, you know.
It's weird. Well, okay, it's not weird. Weird is the exact wrong word. I would say it is typical that we now view anything that comes from Instagram as being of Instagram because that's just the vehicle, right? It's like, oh, they're getting this off of Instagram now. It's like, well, sort of. That's just how we digest things at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I found houses on Instagram. It's like, yeah, but that's kind of the same as finding a house on the internet.
I know, we're all the
That's
Huffington
kind of the
Post.
same as how
I
we've
like when
always
people are,
found houses. It's not Instagram. It's the internet.
yeah, like people are like, the source is Reddit. I'm like, cool. Thank you for telling me that the source was Reddit.
Like an Instagram model, well, what does that even mean? That it's a person who's not from an agency, that they're just an attractive person?
But an Instagram model tells us so much.
But it's also kind of a slight, though. So it doesn't
Yeah.
really tell us anything.
Well, it's the opposite of supermodel, right? When just a working model was a supermodel, and we just applied that prefix to it.
But are they even a model, or are they just someone who has followers on Instagram and happens to be attractive and posts in a thirst trappy way? Are they actually a Instagram model, or are they just a person on Instagram? Are they modeling?
Yep, I believe that word has evolved, and they are definitely models because they're doing a thing. Sort of like, I always think about the
What I mean
idea,
is, are they modeling clothing?
no, they don't have to. It's identity now. It's gone into a hobby. It's like, I'm a singer, I'm a writer. It's like, well, do you get paid to sing and write, or do you just write in your free time? I'm like, well, I'm still a writer, like, that's what you like to do. I'm down for it. Like, I'm a model, but you don't have any contracts. Like, but that's all I do is I model stuff.
I can see it both ways on this. I'm more saying that phrase Instagram model is not one that those people who are being described as would likely use for themselves, but at the same time they might call themselves models even if they are not actively having a modeling career, so therefore it's probably okay.
Yeah, it's a slight. The Instagram part is a
It's
slight.
like every time you see a newspaper like the New York Daily News or New York Post call someone an aspiring rapper, it's a slight.
Or like a mumble rapper. No mumble rapper wants to be called a mumble rapper.
Except for Cardi, who embraces his destiny because
Yeah.
mumbling bought his mother a house.
Yeah, and it eventually catches up, right? And I think the Instagram modeling thing caught up where it was a slight at first, and now it's a huge industry. And there's like people tried to make fun of podcasts for good reasons, but now it's just like, it's just a podcast.
I'm not well versed enough in the cinema landscape to know if mumblecore was a slight or not. Did people who were making movies that were described as mumblecore acknowledge that they were mumblecore, or was that a term that was thrust upon them from outsiders?
I think both. I really love that genre so much, and I wish there was a lot more of it. But I think it was reasonably embraced. But like every person who loves to make things and doesn't make too many of them, I think each successive project, you have to like reframe it, and people got tired of that. Mumblecore did not last long.
Mumblecore is not zombie formalism.
I don't think it is. But zombie formalism was about a market. Mumblecore was an anti-market move. It was responding in the exact opposite way. It's like, oh, there's no demand for this, we're going to do it. But there's a long tradition of it, right? Like, you could trace mumblecore all the way back to Woody Allen or Richard Linklater, Slacker.
I was going to say Clerks probably falls into the mumblecore tradition, and like Annie Hall.
There's precedence for it. And Todd Solondz as well. Like, all those indie movies.
God.
I kind of like his movies.
His movies are incredibly good.
Yeah, they're so awkward, and it makes me cringe. One time, I think I saw episode 1 near Todd Solondz in the theater, Star Wars episode 1, and he was just like fuming. He was just like stewing in his chair, just like grumbling to himself. And I'm like, guy, this is Star Wars. Of course you're gonna hate it. At the time, that's interesting. At the time, it was an especially bad movie, like calling someone an Instagram model. But through the years, I've really come to appreciate episode 1 as like a unique vision that we've never seen again.
Is Happiness the most iconic Gen X movie?
I mean, Welcome to the Dollhouse is more iconic than Happiness, right? That was the one.
I mean, they're both really fucked up.
They're hard to watch.
There's some scenes in Happiness that are just
They don't age well.
Oh God.
Yeah, no.
when you're rooting for the pedophile, that's really
Yikes.
A great feeling to
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah, I kind of, I don't know what he's up to now, but he used to be around a lot. Him and Jim Jarmusch used to be all over. Like, you just go to back when record shops existed or magazine shops, they would just be around all the time.
It's a different time. It's a time of wisdom and patience and virtue. The Gen X era.
When Dan Marley ruled the court.
Now Gen Xers can be looked upon as almost Dalai Lamas in our current cacophony of ideas.
They don't want
Gen Xers.
Yeah. They don't want to get in the way of anything. They just want to observe and let these stories, these follies of these people play out their lives. And Gen Xers just hover above appreciating the human condition.
The hateful boomers, the clueless millennials, the frantic zoomers, and then you have wise and calm Gen X.
Right. Xavier McDaniel.
The X-Men.
Yeah. DMX.
We're on to something here. We're going to have to flesh this out.
Love the Gen Xers, man. Did you see that CNN graphic where they listed all the generations by year and they just forgot to put Gen X in there? And I'm like, yep, because we're above classification.
Yeah, you can't understand Gen X with a simple bar graph. This is some holy shit.
That's right.
Gen X is the forgotten generation. We'll never have a president.
Yeah.
Because Gen X is not big enough.
Gone, but not forgotten.
The Knicks are definitely the most Gen X franchise. For sure. They opted out.
The Dead and Company.
They just decided to opt out of this whole NBA fiasco and just live their lives. You know, they're going to work at a convenience store. They're going to find some vintage vinyl. They're going to do their thing, man.
I went to a screening for a snowboard company that Bill Walton moderated and narrated, and it was all Grateful Dead fueled. So the whole soundtrack was co-signed by the Grateful Dead, and someone told me they were classic recorded Grateful Dead songs. It wasn't unique, and Bill Walton was in the house.
It was Grateful Dead fever last week. They had a couple shows at Madison Square Garden. They had a show a couple nights ago in Long Island. They had it wasn't them, but it was an adjacent tie-dye like exhibition of Dead shirts that was over in Williamsburg on Wythe Avenue. A lot of Dead stuff going on over the last week and a half.
And it's really made a comeback with John Mayer. But have I told you that I kind of left my therapist because she was too excited about the Grateful Dead, and we would spend like half the session talking about her Grateful Dead travels. Like, she's a super fan. She like follows them on tour. She's been doing it for like 40 years. Her whole friend base are Deadheads, and she really loves the new stuff.
Isn't she on the clock?
Yes.
When she's doing that stuff?
Yes, there's a shot clock. She was the Mayor Mamba. But I couldn't really get in the way of her joy. Like, I saw her light up, and like, I just need people's approval so bad. So when my therapist is like, oh my God, I had such a great weekend, so I did this, and like, you don't mind if I go through this? I'm like, no, not at all. This is fantastic. But after like 3 months of that, I was like, I'm going to take this week off if that's okay. And I kind of just never went back.
How are you doing? Have you managed to keep your sanity without your weekly download about the lifestyle of a deadhead?
I mean, I fought. Yeah, I'm fine. This is the therapy, Ben.
You're wrestling with your demons because you can't talk about tie-dye shirts anymore.
Yo, man, tie-dye is never going away. I love the question, like, are arm prints on tees going out of style? Is tie-dye over? What is the bubble with all this stuff? And it's just never going away.
Speaking of which, on this topic, there may be a special something coming in the direction of the cookies store. I'm not going to say anything else, but keep an eye out.
Nice
for that.
tease.
Just a little tease, a little tickle. Wait a minute. So let's get back to your. I know this is all a long circle, a flat time circle,
Right.
but we're going back to this. Why are you not eating meat now? What's that about?
I mean, we've talked about it, but recently, aside from liking animals and maybe not just eating meat casually, not choosing chicken or beef, and maybe having a Gen X approach, and maybe there's a third option we're not seeing with my third eye, but just to be healthier. I just want to, I saw that Netflix documentary about athletes who gave up meat, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and a bunch of football players, and they just got so much better at thinking and moving. Young, old, it just didn't matter. And I want to give that a shot. I want to be better on this podcast, Ben.
I'm looking forward to you getting a better spin move and becoming Apex Quo.
I'm a trash basketball player, but I used to be okay in high school. But
And then
I've lost it all.
And then you started eating all that salumi.
Unfortunately, it's the salumi bias.
I think you can get back to being Apex Quo. I believe in you.
Yeah, I want to get back into playing, man, but I just fear getting hurt now with our healthcare system.
Sounds like you need a little load management.
I've been managing this load my whole life.
So that's like the big boomer story right now. And I think it's, and there's a couple different angles to this. So the NBA has embraced the term load management as basically a euphemism for scheduled rest, or even if it was unscheduled rest. So players want to sit out, they call it load management. First time I remember seeing it was maybe with the Sixers, with Joel Embiid, maybe a year or and change ago. But now it's kind of frequent. And Kawhi Leonard sat out a game this week.
Mark Cuban's done it forever, right?
Right. So people have done this. Greg Popovich did it all the time.
Yeah.
And grew and was criticized a lot for the same thing that now the Clippers and Kawhi are being criticized for, which is sitting out marquee players on nationally televised games. So in this situation, I believe Kawhi Leonard is sitting out against Toronto. Is that correct?
No, the Bucks. He sat out against the
Against
Bucks
the
last
Bucks,
night
sorry.
on
Yes.
ESPN.
Yes, I misspoke. So,
And they lost.
And people were enraged, especially boomers. But the argument here is that NBA games are expensive, and fans show up expecting to see your stars. And if they're healthy but sitting, that's a disservice to the fans, and you are giving them an inferior product at the same price. And they are not fulfilling their expectation of healthy players playing. Would you say that's in general the grievance against load management?
Sure. I mean, I kind of see both ways. We can all see both sides of this, and there's no answer. But my feeling is there's always a type of person that loves to complain about this kind of thing. It's that my controller's broken guy, or the fantasy guy is like, my team's all hurt. I shouldn't be responsible for the buy-in, and I almost see a lot of things in life actually as like a tax. It's like I love the NBA, but the tax is I know either my team's gonna suck or I'm not gonna get the perfect product. And sometimes I realize that sometimes fans don't love to see Patrick Beverley be the alpha. Me and you do, because it's interesting and we know what Kawhi Leonard looks like as the alpha. So for one night, I think it's very enjoyable. But I get how the casual fan is like, I didn't get my money's worth. But my beef is there's a type of person who always says I don't get my money's worth.
I would also, to that exact point, say that the amount of people who specifically decided to go to that game, bought that ticket for their family, and are enraged by the fact that Kawhi is not playing is kind of low. And you may be able to find them. You could find anyone who goes to that game that is disappointed that Kawhi is not playing. Of course that's the case. But most tickets are season tickets or corporate tickets, or they're ones purchased on StubHub the day of the game. There's a lot of variables here. The family who just wanted to see Kawhi and said we're going to, eat rice for a month because we want to go to see Kawhi
Rice is
Leonard.
delicious and is eaten by almost half the world. Even
Nothing
more.
against rice, man. I'm just saying they're
Okay.
they're cutting meat out of their diet so they can see Kawhi Leonard. I'm just saying there are not that many people who are skimping and saving to see Kawhi Leonard. They go to the game and they're like, my experience was fucking ruined because Kawhi Leonard was not there. This is a debacle and a waste of my money. That doesn't really happen that much.
And
Or at least they're not the people who are audibly and vocally irate about this situation.
The experience is kind of almost more intense at home because when you go to a game, there's no announcing. It's hard to find the gravity of the game or the drama in a game when you're in the arena because all you have is like all this dubstep music and 90s rap music and no commentary. So it's really hard to pick out star players in a game. I mean, you could see Kawhi Leonard running up and down the court, but like it's a different experience there. And I agree with you. There's dancing and mascots and things to do like eat and drink and text your friends, and the game goes by so fast. So it's a shame that the star player isn't there and the product is compromised, but it's still a pretty solid product.
And also, people get hurt anyhow.
And he's hurt.
But
Probably.
I guess I don't know. My major thing here is that the NBA has a very long season that has a grueling schedule with a lot of games, and they've made attempts and inroads at spreading games out so there's less back-to-backs, etc. But it's an 82-game season where half the teams make the playoffs. So if we're going to judge players and teams solely on postseason success, because we don't ever give any applause to like Lob City for having incredible regular season records. We laugh at them. And they got hurt a lot. Chris Paul got hurt a lot. Blake Griffin got hurt a lot. And that happened in the playoffs. And if they had benched those guys for rest and load management, maybe some of those wouldn't have happened. Again, we don't know. But if we are going to lionize teams based solely on postseason performance and players, we can't sit here and scream about teams and players trying to preserve their health during the regular season. You can't have it both ways. That's a boomer's paradox.
Boomer's paradox. Also, let's quickly, as an aside, the people most angry about this were kind of led by ESPN talking heads. This game was on ESPN. So I think they were kind of like trying to frame this as something that was out of their control and kind of generating the right story behind it, because tonight on TNT, Kawhi Leonard's playing. And it was I think it was a calculated move by a media company to try to drum up this drama because it led every show.
And it
was kind of a non-story to me.
If you're ESPN, that is a sensible approach to take, because you want there to be a public opinion cost for not showing up for your ESPN game. And you want coaches, franchises, and star players to be aware that they will become a pariah temporarily on ESPN should they decide to sit out on one of those games. And I would do the same thing if I ran ESPN. Like, put out the word.
Oh, I'm a fan, yeah.
We're going after Kawhi today because that guy did not show up last night.
Yes. And
he didn't want it enough.
And I think the more interesting part of this story was Doc Rivers coming out in an interview a few days before all this, saying that he was going to start resting his players during practice. Finally, he was just like, we're just working too hard, and I need to save these guys. And
now, you've been advocating for this for a couple of years. What is your rationale for basically shutting players down for practice?
It's biometric. It's just the idea that maybe literally your knees have bumpers in them, which is the cartilage, and it never regenerates. And a lot of injury is based off of wear and tear. And in practice, the whole narrative of you win games in practice is kind of never proven to be true to me. And I think we're forgetting certain things like mental health and what players eat and how they get along with their teammates. We don't pay enough attention to that as an occurrence in practice, and instead they run suicides and they work overtime and it's an earlier practice and they get worn down physically. And then you have all these kind of things that happen with no causality, because then you just work harder. I'm like, those things aren't related.
I don't know precisely what happens in an NBA practice, because when I've been on media duty, they don't let you watch the practice.
Yeah.
You wait outside, and then they let you in when practice is concluded, and then you can do like your interviews as guys shoot around. And some teams are very paranoid about this, where I remember the Miami Heat were insistent that no one brought out like their cameras in this area where it kind of oversaw their practice facility when I was down in Mexico City. Like they really care about that their practice is totally private. So I don't know if NBA teams are running suicides. I don't know if they're just walking through plays. I don't know if they're doing full scrimmages. I just don't know what happens.
But
so
not to interrupt you, but isn't that so interesting? Because everyone knows there's a handful of plays that work in the NBA, like shoot threes, pick and roll, double team, sag off. All these things are known. But that intel, they don't want you to see who's actually hurt or not. And they can play that chess game, right?
That could be part of it. I also think that there are times when teams are practicing out of timeout plays, end of game plays, that if a team knew what they were going to do, that could be damaging.
That's true.
Okay, we've got 2 seconds left. We need to draw up a tricky play here, and here's what we're going to do. And it's going to be Amare taking a three from the top of the key. And I remember D'Antoni designed that, and Amare missed a wide open shot, and people were mad at D'Antoni. Like, why would you design a play? It's like, because he got Amare a wide open look from the top of the key. It was a great play. Right. But if it was known that they had drawn that up, then he might not have been open. Whatever.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
But to my point prior is, I don't know if guys are running a lot. I don't know if they're digging in and scrimmaging, or they're just walking through sets, or they're running those at half speed, or they're just practicing drills. I don't know what an NBA practice totally consists of, and I don't know how much wear and tear it would put on your body. I remember in high school, you would get exhausted. They would run suicides and drills and rebounding things. It was really physical, and it was all about conditioning because you did it every single day. The pros don't do that every day. So I don't think practice is really about conditioning. And I feel like we kind of hear about it when they do. And when the Bulls with last season had a practice that was, I feel like, a lot of running, like players let it be known that they were not all about that shit.
Well, we know this kind of happens. There's a legend of Kobe yelling at his team for not working hard enough in practice. There's Jimmy Butler schooling the Timberwolves in a practice, a really hard practice. And the Bulls, the players complaining that they're working too hard. This is all evidence that it's happening, right?
Yeah, I think that's true too. I'm more saying I don't know if progressive teams are like, we might run 10-minute scrimmages to see how some units work together to run a couple plays, and we want you guys to do this at game speed, so you're accustomed to it, but we're not trying to wear you into the ground. We're not trying to say we're going to prove a point about you guys needing to be more physical or better conditioned. I just couldn't tell you.
I mean, I think we do know enough. The kind of generational coaches that we have, and the whole idea of high school, or even before high school, and then high school, and then college practices. And we see enough in footage. I mean, in my mind, a practice is just Joel Embiid hugging Nerlens Noel forever, which was like the most tender image. I was like, isn't that what practice is? Like players being like, I love you, man. Like, good luck with everything. The two best guys, you know? But yeah, it's hard to see what's going on in there, but I really think it's funny how people talk about practice in terms of working hard on the court, and you hear about all these players eating Domino's pizza. I'm like, oh, don't work as hard on the court and work harder on other things. Like, I don't know.
Get some sleep.
Absolutely. Get some sleep. And my funny dream of this would be it's just cardio, a little bit of scrimmaging, and therapy, and lifting, and then everything's done in VR. Like you just play, you put on headsets and everyone has their headsets on and you run through practice in VR. It's
Gordon Hayward, incredible practice player.
Yeah.
Just destroying people out there, frags left and right.
Yeah.
The Master Chief of Boston has logged on to practice.
I mean, if they use it for the military and flight simulation to train pilots, then it's good enough for a basketball game, right?
That is true. Another issue involving the idea of rest and minutes and the current generation naturally being soft in comparison to older ones involves the Knicks rookie RJ Barrett, who I believe right now is leading the NBA in minutes. And that's because the Knicks have played more games than anyone else, but he is among the league leaders in minutes played. And this became a source of dissension between two different parties. Some people saying, hey, why are you running this 19-year-old into the ground in a season where you're not in the NBA, you're not interested in winning games? Why are we putting him through the ringer like this? And then other people saying, hey, he's 19 years old. He can handle this. He can play as many minutes as we give him. We're trying to develop him as a player. And, you know, in the past, dudes were playing 38 minutes a game, 40 minutes a game. What's wrong with this kid doing it now?
He's playing
where
37
do you stand
minutes.
on this? Where do you fall on this RJ Barrett? Is he playing too many minutes? Andrew Kuo.
He's to be clear, he's playing 36.8 minutes a game, which is wild. Marcus Morris is playing 33.9. So they're really running these guys. Julius Randle 33. They're putting these guys on the court. I'm not that mad at it. Watching the way he plays, he's not like a runaway train like Mitchell Robinson is, who is the GOAT. But RJ is kind of like a contained player, and I want selfishly, I want to see him a lot. But now that we've seen a big enough sample size, we have a feeling of what he is. I wouldn't mind if they scaled that back. I'm Gen X. I do not have a passionate take on this because that would be ingenuous, and Gen X is genuine.
But Gen X is also peaceful and wise.
Yeah, right. I don't want to fight about RJ Barrett's minutes, man. But it is alarming, and you know, to my point about practice and games, I'd rather have it in games. So I hope they're giving him enough rest outside of all of this. The irony is, Knicks fans, there's a faction of Knicks fans that really want to see Frank Smokes out there, and we're getting too much RJ Barrett and not enough Smokes.
Okay, so yes. This brings me to the real question about this entire RJ Barrett scenario, which is, why are the Knicks playing him so many minutes? Why? What is the reason that the Knicks are playing him 37 minutes a game, in your opinion?
I think it's Dolan, who is very concerned with star power, identifying RJ Barrett as the player that his fans might want to see. And of course he's wrong, but I think he thinks we're coming out to see the young star. And he's like, if he's good, play him. Give the fans their money's worth. And Dolan behaves like this. I remember one really bad season, on the last night, he gave everyone free food. He's very concerned with fan experience, almost to a fault. So I think it's just trying to manufacture a star. And that's why I don't blame Fizz that much. Fizz is collateral damage. Fizz doesn't matter here.
Is Dolan really saying play RJ Barrett 37 minutes a night versus 34? You think that dictum is coming down from ownership? Because I don't.
Well, I don't think he is mad at Fizz for doing it.
I don't think Dolan has anything to do with that. I think this is a Fizdale, and perhaps it's mostly a Fizdale, and perhaps also a Mills or Perry edict. I don't think it has anything to do with James Dolan.
What are you talking about? This whole thing comes from James Dolan's point of view. All these guys don't matter. That's the joke, right? Like Mills, Houston, and Fizz, and Herb Williams was there for years. These guys are just doing what James Dolan... He loves basketball, and he's involved in every move, even though he claims he isn't. Of course he's saying, like, I love this RJ Barrett kid. Just play him.
I'm not sure, but we don't know.
We'll never know. But, this ire that Fizz is getting from fans that were chanting fire Fizz, like, firing a coach is like the dumbest solution for every problem. Of course, not all coaches are created equal. And I kind of like hedge away from the value of like a mid-tier to low-tier coach. I just think it's if you have good players or not. And the coach is going to take the downfall for not having good players.
Well, the thing about Fizz is that he's now equally under siege from the people who want the Knicks to just play young guys and tank. And he's also under attack from the guys who thought the Knicks would have the talent because they spent $60 million on vets to make the 8th seed. So Fizz has really nowhere to go at this point. If he tries to win games, he alienates the people who want the team to tank and rebuild. If he goes that direction, then people will say, well, we're underachieving. Why do we have all these guys like Marcus Morris a Morai brother and Taj Gibson,
who's not even playing?
But right,
it's
so
wild.
He's in a really tough spot as a coach because he kind of has to win to keep his job. That's also not a good long-term plan, but people want to see the young guys as well, and he sort of has to play them. I do not envy the rock in a hard place situation that Fizz now finds himself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a 100% chance James Dolan is thinking that these summer acquisitions would get him sniffing around the 8th seed. And the fans want everything. I can't... Knicks fans are really tough, and they have a specific agenda, which is reasonable. But I just can't listen to their complaints about this team because you're right. It's constructed poorly. The game was made with like glitches in it. So when you're fighting the first level opponent, it's going to glitch on you because this thing was constructed poorly. I don't know if we should go through their team ratings, but it's laughable how bad this team is this year.
That's true. And a few of those numbers are that they have the worst plus-minus differential in the NBA. They're 29th in offensive rating. They're 29th also in true shooting percentage. I believe their defense is in the mid-20s. They are 28th in deflections and 27th in charges drawn. So this is a team that is very bad at everything. They are bad at scoring. They're bad at defending. They're bad at passing. I think they're
27th in pace.
27th in pace, 27th in assist percentage. They are an absolutely awful team. And looking back at the summer, as we were critical of their maneuvering, after striking out on marquee free agents, they decided to dump their money into vets, into guys who would punch you in the fucking face. That was essentially their plan. Like
Or
Taj
bonk
Gibson.
you with a ball.
Yeah, Taj, he'll punch you in the fucking face. What about this Morris guy? Absolutely, he'll punch you in the fucking face. Who else? Ooh, Bobby Portis. He loves face punching. Get
And
him. And they got tough guys, garden protectors, one might describe them as. But they did not get players, other than Morris, who's actually been pretty good, who one could consider legitimate starters on NBA teams. Yeah. And Morris is the only one of those guys. And Randall. Randall has struggled in part because they have so many guys who kind of want to be on the floor in the same place that he wants to be.
He also runs out of talent.
He's been really bad. And I did not mind that signing because I was like, look, he put up some good numbers. If you believe in the guy and he's young enough that he can be part of your future, he's been very bad.
And I was more apologetic than you this summer because I'm defeated. And and shout out to Cat Marnell. But like, I take a different tone with this team because I was just thankful they didn't do classic Knicks things. In my opinion, signing hurt superstars like Kevin Durant and stars like Kyrie Irving, who I love so much. But that was a classic Knicks move. So I was just grateful they were breaking from that pattern. And there was a vision because all these guys were tradable. These guys are all bad and no one's going to want them. But I was at least grateful we weren't saddled with Clarence Weatherspoon number 5. Do you know what I mean?
Are you suggesting that Julius Randle is not Clarence Weatherspoon number 5?
But we only have him for 2 years, right? I think they signed and traded Clarence Weatherspoon for 5 years. Like, this is, at least it's 2 years. And
yeah, at least in the Gen X era, you could sign guys at 10 years. You'd have, some loyalty.
Yeah. I mean, this team is a mess, and Dennis Smith Jr. is a sad case, and I don't know if he's going to make it in the NBA, and he's had a really tough personal week. But, I don't know what Alonzo Trier is doing on the team. It's like he's going to break the mold. You think he's like ISO Zoe, but he's more than that. I'm like, I just don't care. Like, he's not a part of this future moving forward. It's sort of like seeing all these players pass through, hearing people chanting for Frank as their first round point guard reminded me of Frank Williams. We've been doing this forever, and things can change on a dime. I think the possibility of Zion, Durant, and Kyrie was like on the table, a 10% chance, and it didn't work out.
When you go into a summer and orchestrate this sort of Colangelo style measured rebuild where you just blow your bankroll on mediocre vets because they're the guys who will come and pay and play for you. They will take your money because they're not good enough to take money elsewhere. No other team is willing to pay them as much as you, so they dutifully waddle over there and take your money. And that's what happened with JJ Redick. And it could be sold as, oh, he's there for the culture. He did this thing. He wants to be a part of a rebuild. No. They just offered him so much more money than anyone else that Redick showed up.
He's so bad this year.
And Redick happened to be a really good shooter, and he helped the Sixers. But the Knicks didn't really get a guy like that. Or they don't even need a guy like that. But anyway, the major point was the Knicks were a 17-win team. For them to add a bunch of mediocre players, at best, was going to make them still a very bad team. So you kind of ultimately end up in this same situation where you're still really bad, and now you've got a bunch of vets who are unhappy. You have fans who are unhappy because you kind of have to play these vets, and the fans have been sold the idea of improvement. You've raised expectations by blowing money on veteran players and telling fans that there's a cultural shift going on. So the team sucks. You've got veterans who are irritated. You have fans who are annoyed. And it's just this unhappiness.
Lay off, man. This is easy, buddy.
It's goth. But what I'm saying is, if the Knicks had just said, we're going to sell cap space, we're going to sign Taj as like a player coach with like $10 million and just play the young guys, you would not have this dark cloud over the organization. They would be bad, but they'd be playing Knox and they'd be playing RJ and they'd be playing Frank, and people would be like, hey, they suck, but they're playing the young guys and they're going to get another good pick.
What universe are you living on where fans, the alleged smart fans in New York, would see that and be like, oh, I see a vision? They'd just be like, all these draft picks suck. What are we doing? Let's burn it down again. Like this.
I don't know, man. Frank has looked okay. People are happy with RJ. Knox has shot really, really well. He's been a good offensive player.
I like Knox, man.
Just a fluke or not, Knox is shooting like 50% from three or like 45% from three. He's kind of balling out on that side of the court. I'm just saying, if you were playing Mitch, RJ, Knox, and Frank, and losing games, there would not be the same gloominess over the organization.
I disagree, man. Come on. In what universe? Like, of course, there's a bunch of nerds that would love it and a bunch of writers that would love it, but they would just get booed out of MSG. This is a terrible idea.
I disagree, man. You're falling into the cliche of you can't rebuild in New York. The Knicks.
No, that's not what I'm doing. I would love that, but in what world would the fans that want to fire Fizz, who doesn't even matter here, be cool with that? Of course I want that. We are the nerds, right?
I'm saying I think Knicks fans were fairly positive and forgiving of those lousy teams under Walsh when they were starting to sort of hit the reset button after the Scott Bin Laden era. Knicks fans were pretty chill about those lousy teams. They kind of didn't care as much, but everyone sort of understood what was happening.
I think the Knicks fans have evolved to be the best version of themselves currently. Back then, we were even worse. We expected different things back then and had different gripes. I agree. We have to see these young players, but it's easy to say, I want to see these guys kind of like figure out their games. So that's why I'm not that mad at RJ Barrett playing those minutes. But in what world would Knicks fans collectively be okay with anything aside from a championship? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the culture of being a Knicks fan now, which is complaints.
I'm saying when the Knicks had I think it was their second season under D'Antoni, they went 29-53.
But
they were lousy. They were really bad.
You're missing my overall point.
That was the team where you had David Lee, Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, Tony Douglas, your guy, Henry Walker, Nate Robinson.
Skywalker to you.
Jordan Hill. That was not a hated team. People were not mad at that team in the way they are about the team this year. At least in my recollection. I could be wrong. I just don't feel like people were mad about that team because most of the guys getting minutes other than Al Harrington and Chris Duhon were young.
I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10 mad, of course you can compare, but this is a whole different feeling. Like, this is a different metric now.
And the next season they went to the playoffs.
But you're missing, I think, the Gen X point about this. It's just like, of course, some Knicks fans weren't as mad as teams that were better. But we're talking about the entire like idea of being mad at a team, right? And there are reasons to boo a team if you look for it. And you were right before when you said this team, through its mistakes this summer, are stuck between a rock and a hard place. So a fan can pick and choose whatever they want to be upset about this season.
Yes. They did this to themselves.
Yes.
By executing this middle ground, no upside, low risk, or at least seemingly no risk strategy, they put themselves directly in the crossfire of everybody.
That's circular. When you have all these issues and make mistakes, people can criticize you for all the issues and multiple mistakes. So I don't like. I'm not concerned with other Knicks teams that were good, and I know David Lee was an all-star, but bringing that up doesn't matter at this point, right?
Take that back.
Yo, when David Lee got announced for that all-star game, I got wistful, man. It was like the first all-star we'd seen in years.
I'm just saying, I'm giving Knicks fans a little bit more credit than you, and maybe that is my mistake. Maybe I am foolish for giving Knicks fans even a soupçon of credit. But I do think that if they played the kids, the majority of Knicks fans would say, I get the vision. I understand what's happening. I may not like it. It may make me less interested in following the team. I may
3 bad losses and that goodwill is gone.
But I'm saying you opt out. When you are a really bad team, you go Gen X. Because when I was rooting for the Sixers during the process, the only year that actually bummed me out was the one where they won 9 games and they kept trying to play Okafor next to Nerlens. And it was just a huge bummer, and then Hinkie got booted, etc. The prior 2 years where they were cycling through players, total no-names would get signed. Every now and then you get a glimmer of hope. Oh, Elliot Williams, this guy. I think he's going to be like an all-star. And then he'd be gone.
KJ McDaniels.
Exactly. Ooh, Henry Sims, the future of the league.
All
those guys. But that stuff was fun, and it wasn't hard to be a fan because there were no stakes.
But there was a vision. There's no vision with the Knicks.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Is that I think even hard-headed Knicks fans, not every single one of them, but the fat part of the bell curve could get behind. No shaming. Could get behind the idea that the Knicks are playing the kids. They're going to rebuild through the lottery, and they're going to see what they have out of these young guys. I think even knuckleheads would be like, I get it, even if I don't like it.
See, I mean, that's the premise of our disagreement, which is like small, which is like, I think we've been to the Garden recently. If you look around, it's all knuckleheads. So I think on the edges, there's going to be fans being like, oh, yeah, this is the plan. You have to play and lose with these young guys. The majority would be like, oh, these young guys aren't even good. I'm like, yeah, a lot of them won't be good, but you have to find out. But I think the beef will be after 3 bad losses to bad teams, being like, now these young guys suck. Where do we go? Boo, boo, boo. Right.
But here's a question. Has the success of teams like Philadelphia and this year, at least initially, Phoenix, shifted that perception maybe a little bit?
I don't
Where you
think
can
it
say,
has.
Phoenix has sucked, but if you suck and you get some good talents and you let them play and then you see what you have and you add a few more pieces, you can end up being good. And the Sixers, look how awful they were, but they ended up with a couple superstars and now they're a contender. I think there's a change in perception maybe, where even Knicks fans could say, hey, look, Devin Booker and the Suns, they were terrible and they lost games, but they figured it out. And we can do that if we give our young guys a chance.
I am not as optimistic about that shift. I think people still clown the Sixers for doing the process. And I think people don't believe in the Suns. But they believe in Devin Booker because of dribble bias and he scores and he's kind of good, you know?
That's true.
Bane's season, though. Woo.
He looks good. He did a good job against Philly. They had him guarding Simmons, and Simmons had trouble like just getting buckets on him in the post. And that, of course, led to a full-fledged meltdown from Sixers fans towards Ben Simmons. It's honestly just some straight-up brainworm shit. I can't recall a fan base who's been so feverishly hostile and negative towards a guy who was Rookie of the Year, an all-star in his second season, a top 20 player in the NBA, and they fucking hate him. They hate him. It is really stunning. It is absolutely shocking.
I mean,
the Sixers started going 5-0, undefeated. They lose a game to a solid team without Joel Embiid, and it's a close game. And they are irate at Ben Simmons because he went 2 of 8 and scored 6 points. Why are they crazy? I mean, I don't know why they're crazy. I can't figure it out. In my mind, it has to be based solely on emotions. Like, there's nothing about basketball here. When Simmons was on the court, the Sixers had like a 116 offensive rating. When he was off, they had a 75 offensive rating. They could not score without him on the court.
You and your nerd numbers. I know what I see with my eyeballs, and it's that Ben Simmons is not keeping defenses honest. When he is keeping, aside from when he is keeping defenses honest. But I think these are built-in emotions, like you said. I think people have these takes in the chamber and are just waiting to unleash them without getting too repetitive. Like, he is a really interesting person in the NBA because I think he draws a lot of our like weaknesses as like people who observe things collectively, you know, and I think we're not looking at the thing, and he is just so heavily affected by our own personal biases that I don't know, that it's hard to figure out how we actually feel about him. And I don't think winning 3 championships would make a lot of people happy.
I mean, that's the thing that is totally clear, is that they will never stop because it's not about basketball. They will never, ever, ever stop. They won't because
and that's
they
the
were
difference with
5-0.
Knicks fans.
They were 5-0. They lost a game on the road to a good team without Joel Embiid. And it's like that shit where people have been hypnotized and they walk around normally, and then they hear this bell toll, and all of a sudden they just lose their fucking shit. That's basically what happened. They saw Ben Simmons go 2 of 8 and were reduced to these like drooling zombies who are trying to put their head through your fucking window. It was nuts, dude. It was nuts. A team that was 5-1 and people were freaking out.
Well,
and then accusing me of being a troll by telling them to stop like urinating in their diapers.
I mean, Twitter's not great, but it reminds me of my favorite Clydeism, Clyde Frazier, when he says the Knicks aren't an organization that can handle prosperity, and I think a lot of people can't do that, and the Sixers Nation maybe can't handle prosperity because they had won the lottery, literally and figuratively, with Ben Simmons, and it kind of reminds me. Did you read this Wired article about people, like rich people who kind of alienate themselves. It made me think of that Clydeism, being like, Ben Simmons is exactly who you wanted, but we can't really wrap our brains about it.
That's an interesting point. And it has to do with expectations and everything suddenly not being good enough. And the article you're talking about came out in Wired, which was entitled, "Why Are Rich People So Mean?" And it's an interesting read. It just went up. Actually, I take that back. I think it went up in late September, but I just got around to reading it. Mm-hmm. And they describe it as rich asshole syndrome. That's what the Wired article that was written by Christopher Ryan, but not the Christopher Ryan of Ringer fame, however.
Shout out to Chris Ryan.
Of Ringer fame, yes. But it describes how people who are wealthy and are further removed from society and isolated become more selfish and more cruel, and they start cheating in games more. They become more dishonest. They steal the further they get away. And it's sort of how your humanity gets drained out by wealth. And this is not saying every rich person is like this, but it's a pretty interesting idea that it's not being a dick makes you rich. It's being rich makes you a dick.
Mm-hmm. And I think everything affects your... I always joke, like, when I was younger, I had friends who smoked weed every day, and they were just, like, chill. As I got older, and those same friends smoked weed every day for 20 years, half their lives, I started thinking to myself, this is changing your personality and your brain. Like, you've become a different person through this action. And this goes, like, if you watched a horror movie every night for 20 years, you would change too. The wiring in your brain would just connect differently.
Well, it's like if someone became a dry drunk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that the chemical reaction that we're talking about? If you were an alcoholic for a long time, your brain becomes wired differently.
Yeah. And I think, we've heard about this, the lottery curse. People who win the lottery end up being unhappier through various situations and various scenarios. But in general, like, there is a theory that you don't want all the things that you think you want. And when you get them, it changes your brain. And I think, I just kept on thinking about Ben Simmons. And I was just like, oh, God, I would kill to have Simmons on the Knicks. But then will I be upset with him too, in a different way, And I think, like, the reason I love that Clydeism so much, you can't handle, being able to handle prosperity is like a pretty Gen X thing. I think it's a really cool idea, and it puts into like a larger picture of like, what are Philly fans mad about with Ben Simmons? What are Knicks fans mad about with this team that seems stuck? What are we actually upset about with Kawhi Leonard sitting? It asks this like wistful, question that I really enjoy kind of like staring out the window and thinking about.
Thinking about Randall's?
Staring at Randall.
It's interesting how much anger is a crucial part of fandom. And it makes me wonder if that's part of the innate connection between tribalism and patriotism and sports on a national level or even a local level, that these are your colors, this is your shield, and there's an element of anger towards both opponents and your own side. I'm trying to think it through, but when you see troops being trotted out at every sporting event, or jets flying ahead or above the stadium, and people roaring, and the U.S. military trying to weasel its way into the NFL and paying taxpayer money to do so, the connection between rage and sports becomes, I don't know. Most fans aren't happy with their team.
Yeah, that's
because only one team can win.
Right. I agree, and this is not only an American thing. This is like a world thing. This is just a human thing, right? Like, this happens throughout history with everybody, and it's tough to see the idea of leadership getting parsed down with every, like, every scale of an organization. Like, is the owner a good leader? Is the GM a good leader? Is the coach a good leader? Who's the leader on the court? Who's the leader in the locker room? And I'm like, can we just like let this go? Like, can we just like give everyone a little bit of a breather, because it's a basketball game, and I know it's very, very important and it affects our lives in really big ways, but it can also not. And we're given this choice as sports fans to figure out how we care and how we root for teams. And I feel really lucky to be able to not actually get mad about losing, right?
But that's kind of what this idea of why rich people are mean is based on, because in the NBA landscape, you are impoverished. You are the poorest of the poor. You are a child living in the slums, sniffing, I don't know, glue and eating scraps out of dumpsters. That is who you are as a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
You have nothing but empathy for other teams and sympathy for other teams because you are an untouchable.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story I can never forget. It was, I was sitting at home watching TV, and I decided I was hungry, and I went to go get, I think, like a falafel or gyros at Barrett, a place that used to be on Houston, and everyone was out partying. And
Love Barrett.
I miss it. It was so delicious.
And you could walk right over afterwards and get the latest mixtape right down the street.
That's right. The roaring aughts, Ben. But
true Gen X shit right there, baby.
And then I think a bunch of, guys that didn't look like I do started harassing me and calling me names. And I was wearing headphones, but I heard everything. And I didn't stop to interact with them. And as I was like 3 feet beyond them, they were like, "Didn't you hear me? Come back. Did you hear what I said to you?" And in my mind was like, why would I stop? I have this delicious sandwich under my arm. I have my TV. The game's still going on. I have a couch. Like, in what universe would I stop to interact with you? It's like, I will take your insults and take them to heart, but I'm going home to enjoy my delicious sandwich and watch the rest of this game. And that's how I feel about being a Knicks fan. Like, I don't want to ruin this great thing by interacting with the dark part of it, right?
I can feel that, because when the Sixers were anticipated to be awful and would surprisingly win a game every now and then, or you'd catch glimpses of a player who might have a future in the NBA. He might end up being Dwayne Dedman. Those were the upsides. Those were the highlights. But there were no stakes. And I'll say, it's not that I liked the Sixers more when they were bad, but that was kind of more fun than being invested in having to win every night. That a game is not a joy to beat someone. It's like excruciating if they lose. Mm-hmm. And that expectation kind of goes to the heart of that article about why rich people are mean. And that as you get further away from being a Knicks fan and living in the streets, and you start having expectations of, we're supposed to win a championship, we deserve it, we are better than other teams, you start enjoying things less. You start becoming less generous. You start becoming angrier and more cruel. And I'm not saying this is a exact 1-for-1 that poor people are happy and rich people are unhappy, and in fact they're the real losers. I'm not saying that at all. No. I am talking about this idea of proximity to wealth versus distance from wealth, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
100%.
I don't know. I tried to get that together. I'm not sure if I actually pulled it off, but hopefully you understood what I was trying to get across. Yeah,
and what you're talking about isn't necessarily confined to monetary wealth or even
when you're just
wealth.
A member, when you're an anonymous member of a dirty mass in the NBA, and you don't think you are owed anything, and you're not expecting anything, it is easier to be a fan than when you're like, we have to win this year. This is our window. If we don't do it, the coach needs to be fired. We need to trade everybody, and we need to tear this thing down.
Yeah, and I back to the way your brain is wired thing. Like, I have like this loose theory that New England fans with the Patriots and Lakers fans with the Lakers, their wiring is kind of different as human beings if you pay attention to that stuff, because they're so used to succeeding, and they have different expectations, and it kind of bleeds into like a cultural thing where they start thinking about things with a different framework than someone in New York who maybe went through like 9/11 and the Knicks. It's like a really heavy regional shifting of the way our brains are wired, and we're so lucky in New York that we get to talk to people who live through all those Lakers championships, but they talk about sports in a different way, right? I mean, we get to see it all staying in one place is what I mean, right? Like, we get to talk to everybody and we're still here, but
Lakers fans are the worst because
they're
of
tough.
their stretch of sustained greatness, and also being in a market that told everyone that you were more important, and it was validated on the court. And that combination of being on TV constantly, being where all the celebrities are, being, an epicenter for basketball, but also winning lots and lots of games and lots of titles and having the best players, that is absolutely a seductive potion to inject into your freaking brain.
And imagine just quickly as like just putting it into a different context and talking to someone about their job, being like, well, I deserve more money and a better position because I'm good at what I do, as opposed to someone who might say, I don't have the money or position, but I need to think about this in another way and be smarter about it. It's like it just crosses over so quickly in the way you talk about a basketball game or a team into like a relationship or dating or your job or where you live. It happens really fast.
There's a really good connection between what we're talking about and the movie Parasite, but I don't want to spoil that movie at all for anyone. And I do think that in general, that film is best digested with as little information as humanly possible. So I'm going to refrain from getting into that too much. I will say these ideas about class resentment and mobility are very present in that film, which I highly recommend, and I wish we could talk about it, but
But it's
at
not
this
out
point,
yet. Yeah.
I'm
I'm mad at his last movie though, so I'm gonna have trouble with this.
It's one of those films where it's both funny and excruciating at the same time, and that things are slowly going off the rails, sort of like Uncut Gems, in that same way of the movie just has this tempo of tying
Uncut
it
Gems, the
tighter
movie.
and tighter and tighter. Yeah. It's like a wrench around your neck, and you're just like, all right, I know it's getting tighter. I get it.
Yeah. Let's save it for when it comes out.
Yes, I'm saying that's the sensation of both of these movies, which you should both see if you get the chance.
Yeah. I don't love that guy's movies, but I'll definitely watch it. But yeah, I mean, we've kind of hinted or even talked about all this stuff on Cookies before, but I think like articles like that Wired article, and the more people kind of think about it, the more clear it becomes, like the different ways that you can approach the experience of like watching a team, or the way we frame Ben Simmons and the way the interns talk about the game with like the interns could afford to be more serious, and when people accuse them of being a little too flippant, I'm like, well, this is not serious.
That's your brain on less gruel, dog.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's the wiring of a gruel-less cranium.
The interns don't know
That's the Mountain Gruel-less.
Yeah. They don't know what to do with less. I lost it. The interns will help me though, as long as we give them less gruel.
Yeah, I don't know what they would do with more gruel. But this ties into another debate about billionaires that's been raging a bit, with Bill Gates kind of saying, well, I'm able to give all this money away because I have billions and billions of dollars. Like, why would you want to take my billions? And people also say, yeah, but if we took $100 billion away from you, you'd still have billions. So, like, why do you need hundreds of billions?
Bill Gates is such a complicated example because he has a plan for those 100 billion. So he came out yesterday or a couple of days ago and said, I'm all for giving more of my billions away to you, but as soon as you ask me for almost all of it, I have to stop Elizabeth Warren at becoming the nomination for president, because in his point of view, he knows what to do with that money better than the government. And he specifically
Does he?
I don't know, but
Because he certainly seems to be hoarding it and not using it for things.
well, he promised to, and it takes time, and it's his money, man. He made that money fair and square-ish. But
Is it his money?
well, I mean, do you believe in the salary cap in the NBA? Like, this is a problem that I'm really conflicted with this because I want to. It doesn't feel cool siding with billionaires, but if
But I'm saying, yes, they earned their money in the current system. Is the current system in which one individual is allowed to have hundreds of billions of dollars thereby flawed? I think that's a bigger question as to whether or not he did anything wrong to get that money. Who's to say what the morality of having that much money is the bigger question. Like, should one person have $100 billion? Like, probably not. There's no reasonable reason for someone to have that money.
Yeah,
Unless, of course, they are allowed to have it.
I agree. I think we, as a society, have gone past the idea of actual royalty and actual like kings and the lineage of all the wealth being at the top. But this is something that's happened for a long time, and I think we should fix it, and it shouldn't be this way. But also, we turn into David Stern not letting Chris Paul go to the Lakers to win championships because he wanted to sacrifice money for that royalty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't wrapped my brain around whether your salary cap metaphor is false or not, because we're also talking about in both situations it's kind of a closed loop, but they're so different between like the income of the league and having a salary cap, or like the income of the globe. Like, they could be compared in a way, but is one like a terrarium and one is like the actual universe?
Well, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out now. I mean, I think it's at the very least, the NBA is a test subject for the way a global market behaves, right? Or even a U.S. market. But they're global, and I think having 29 players in this market vying for value is pretty comparable to the way these billionaires build their wealth. And certain teams build wealth in ways that reflect business decisions in the stock market.
It's hard to compare the two because the NBA has a salary cap. And I don't like the salary cap in terms of what it means for the players, but we're talking about players versus owners. It's kind of a weird...
But Bill Gates is a player. That's the thing that I'm trying to say. The owner is the economy. The owner is the market. Bill Gates is Kevin Durant.
And that's true, but we're also... I don't know.
It's hard. Well, I have no answers.
But basketball is also something where players are rewarded out of like meritocracy, and we're saying, is Bill Gates worth hundreds of billions of dollars out of actual meritocracy, or was he just good at one thing? Like, he was good at building computers at the right time in the right place.
Microsoft is an amazing company, and I would definitely be on the side of like their wealth is scary, and I don't know how to correct that, but their operating system changed the world moving forward. Yeah, Bill Gates is a genius.
Oh, I think that's true, but it's also saying is like, I don't know. It's a thorny one, because if you got rid of the salary cap in the NBA,
which
what would happen?
We're into.
But what would happen then? You would have the Knicks able to say, okay, but these are two different things. This is where I'm a little confused, because having the salary cap to me in the NBA is okay. The problem Wait. The problem is having max player deals. The problem is saying you can't pay this player the amount that you want. The salary cap does make sense in terms of, okay, the Knicks can't use their TV money to just buy everybody, nor can the Lakers. So that way, a team in Minnesota that does not have the advantage of TV money can compete with them. But the max salary thing is more of my issue.
Why? Explain the max salary being independent from the first thought.
What I'm saying is the max salary for superstars is determined by being a percentage of the salary cap. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a maxed contract can be 1/3, say, of the salary cap, and that's what the most a player can earn on a seasonal basis. And it's based on the overall profits of the league and their sharing between players and owners, etc. So I'm saying if a team has $100 million to spend and says, I want to give $70 million to that to LeBron James, I think that's cool. You should be able to pay as much as you want. I also am sympathetic to the idea that teams in huge markets with built-in TV deals and arenas that have massive concerts and just population centers versus small teams, there is a built-in advantage that if you have just unlimited cap, it does favor those teams a lot.
Yeah, and you're right. It's thorny, and I think we can understand where parity and competitive balance is like. They mean well by it. I think in his heart, David Stern meant well by not letting Chris Paul go to the Lakers, but I think he probably immediately regretted that. There's too many moving parts to be able to predict the future like that. But I think the idea of maybe big markets in the stock market, bigger companies, there's always going to be that. Like it's hard to create parity with a team like Minnesota. And we're trying, the NBA is, socialist. And I think they're trying to prop up teams like the Phoenix Suns in order to be able to compete with the Golden State Warriors. But that's
because the markets are of different sizes.
Yeah,
if every single city in the NBA had the same.
But why can't markets just be different?
All the ownership had, right, they can be. But
you're just not LA. That's okay. And the wonderful thing about I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the wonderful thing about this structure of this basketball league is you have a finite number of minutes, players, and bench spots. So as soon as the Knicks spend $500 million on Team USA, there's no more minutes to play. So it has to go somewhere, and the market will dictate that. Does this trickle up or trickle down economics?
You could argue that a team like Minnesota, if they're unable to make money, should pull up the stakes and move. You could argue that. Or you can say adjust your expectations according to your market size. That if you get really smart and you get a superstar and you do everything right, then you can compete. Maybe you can win a championship. But a team like the Lakers or a team like the Knicks can just outspend you. And one thing that people don't talk about when we look back at those Dirk Mavs teams was that not only was Dirk taking less money than he could have, that the Mavs were outspending everyone on a season-to-season basis by a shit ton. And that was before they really put in a lot of the more strident moves towards curtailing teams going over the cap, like the repeater offense or all those things like that. The Mavs were outspending people by a lot, and Dirk was taking less money than he was supposed to, or that he was entitled to, basically, by his merit as a player. So they had this incredible built-in advantage for a long time, that they had an owner willing to overspend and a player who was taking less than he was worth. And as a result, they were really good for a long time. And the Spurs kind of did the same thing.
Let them do
that. Tim
that.
Duncan and Dirk bought their rings. That's all I'm saying.
Let them do that. I mean, are we pretending that's not happening anyway? Like, all the good teams in the West were bought. It's not like this holistic spiritual thing where Steph Curry just virtuously appears in a Warriors jersey. He was drafted. There's a whole strategy with this, and I don't know. It's like I think Bill Gates gets a lot of ire because of many reasons, but the salary cap is an issue for me because in baseball there's no salary cap. Well, there's a soft cap. You have to pay a tax, and a lot of teams go way over, like the Yankees and the Astros. And in hockey, I believe there's no salary cap. But in basketball, and especially football, which is the most cruel of all, they really tell certain people what they're allowed to earn in their company. And to me, that's a really tough pill to swallow. And even though Bill Gates doesn't look like these players that we love in the NBA, he's operating like Kevin Durant, saying, I am the best at what I do, therefore I make the most money than anybody.
I don't know. I'm not sure. There is certainly the ability for players to say, I want to get every penny that I'm worth. And then there's also a Bill Gates thing where it's like, am I supposed to have this much money? He didn't do anything wrong, but I'm saying, should Bill Gates actually have multiple hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever, or whatever it is, over $100 billion? I just can't sit here and say, yeah, a system that allows that is a system worth saving. Agreed.
And now that's undeniable. I agree. I don't believe in kings and queens and actual.
That's all it is. It's like you made a good point before. Bill Gates is royalty because he designed a computer system that was really influential, and he has been rewarded with that financially in an incredible way. But he doesn't need to have $100 billion. Neither does Jeff Bezos. That's insane that he has hundreds of billions of dollars as a fucking middleman, quote, a middleman. The most vile and disreputable of professions, a filthy middleman.
I would claim that Bill Gates' operating system is also a middleman company, which I'm not mad at, But Windows is a middleman company. Like, it's just a management thing.
The worst. Get these middlemen out of here.
But
we're the craftsmen.
That's right. Where's my felt tip pen or my? But I think I don't have an answer for this, and all I know is when I feel bad about something, and I feel bad when NBA players aren't allowed to choose their teams and make all the money that they're worth. But I also, I look at Bill Gates, I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I am totally pro player when it comes to NBA, and I don't think there should be a max contract.
They shouldn't be drafted
like plateau, either. I don't like that either.
Yeah,
but I don't know, man. I have one other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is talking about middlemen, is that so. My opinions, and I'm not sure about yours, on things like Seamless and Grubhub have been well documented on Cookies Hoops basketball podcast, the most influential basketball podcast. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. But a new trend, and I think it's been going on for a little while, so new may be a inaccurate, but a growing trend is that they're calling them ghost kitchens. And people are going into shitty, dilapidated areas, industrial corridors, if you will, and are building these kitchens that make a whole bunch of different kinds of food. And then they have places on Seamless that are designed to look like actual restaurants, but they don't exist. And they'll be working out of the same kitchen. They might be one restaurant that's listed on Seamless as having like waffles, and one that might be Thai, and one that might be, I don't know, chicken fingers. And they all have the same address and the same, contact information. You wouldn't know that because you're not going there, but they deliver food all made out of that one kitchen via Seamless. Kind of shitty trend there.
Not surprisingly, I don't care at all. Is it good? Are the chicken fingers good? I just don't care about authenticity. You can't trick me.
I don't know if it's really about authenticity.
Then what are you mad at? It's food getting made.
I don't like the idea that these are restaurants that people can't go to.
Really? I don't care, man.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
So it's So are you mad at supermarkets because you're not going to a farm?
Yeah.
I mean, we should live by more farms,
I
But
don't know. I don't like it. I don't like this little ghost restaurant thing that they're just creating entries for you to order food from. I get that, like, whether it's good or not is ultimately whether you want to eat it or not. But I also just don't like it.
I know where you're going. I don't want to be flippant about it. I get you. It's just something I don't, and I've trained myself not to care about. Like, I don't care that a white person is making my lo mein. Is it good? If it's not good, I won't go back. It doesn't have to fit for me. If it's a kitchen that pumps out all different bunches of food, I'm like, cool, you're Draymond Green. You can do a bunch of stuff. You're a specialist. You're JJ Redick.
I'm a unitasker.
Yeah,
Just waffles, please.
What's wrong with a kitchen that can do a whole bunch of stuff? If it's good, we'll buy it. If it's not good, they'll go out of business.
Well, that's not the case, though, because what they're doing is presenting themselves as local restaurants.
Oh, so what?
With independent names that you would imagine are actual restaurants, but they're all just the same kitchen, just throwing shit into it. And like, I guess it's in some ways almost like a modern diner, but you're eating the stuff at home. This goes into this thing that I was talking about before, though, this isolationism. And this is boomer, but I don't love it. I don't love the idea of people ordering from middlemen food that's being made by places that you can't go into. I'm not into it. That is not, to me, the way that we should be embracing dinner. That's not a way we should be looking at how we eat as humans. Being by yourself, ordering from a middleman, getting it from a place with a bunch of people who are just shoveling things into styrofoam cartons and then you're eating them. I can also see the other side of that as like, well, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on the side of, and I know there's conflicting research about it, but on one hand, people think social media is making us more reclusive and kind of changing our brains in isolationist ways. And then other research is like, if you talk to people, you're still talking to them. Like, we've met a lot of people just through this podcast and the internet stuff in an IRL that, like, I'm on the side of the social media landscape has created more real life. So the micro interaction of ordering takeout from a ghost kitchen and eating it, I just don't care about.
And I get that because, I mean, I understand that side of it. Yeah. There are many places that exist that you call and then you never step foot in. I would say that, for example, like Indian restaurants are probably the best example. We've all ordered them, but you kind of infrequently go to a neighborhood restaurant to sit inside of it.
Yeah, there's certain food, and this is the whole debate with cost of food, right? Like, why isn't Mexican food more expensive? It's like, oh, we're so used to the mechanism of getting it from a street cart or, an affordable place that we kind of balk at a $30 entree. But Italian food is just sometimes pasta and sauce, and why is that $20 and we're okay with it? I mean, there's a lot of built-in reasons.
Mexican food also is kind of like Indian food in that way, and also Chinese food. It falls under a lot of ethnic food that you get home and you order, and you do not eat in those restaurants as like a destination, despite the fact they might be near your house.
For sure. And
so that participation is not so different from a ghost kitchen, I would acknowledge. But I also still don't like it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and your heart's in the right place, and I know what you mean, because me and you love restaurants, and we love going to restaurants and sitting there and talking about the space and just like hanging out, and we enjoy that. And I think it's in New York especially, it's like a real privilege to do. And there's so many options that I think what you're saying makes sense to me. All I'm saying is sometimes like, oh, I just love to be alone with like a little takeout, and just being alone and not talking to anybody.
And a lot of this is me. I can't stand takeout food. I hate it.
It's usually bad, but sometimes it's okay.
I think it sucks. I think it's hard to order portions correctly. You end up getting too little or too much, and
it's very expensive.
It's expensive. I just find the entire procedure, shout out to Boston, just very unrewarding in every possible way.
Yeah, and
beyond
more,
the whole
yeah.
thing of Seamless and Grubhub, which I detest and refuse to use, and have not at this point for, I don't know, 8 months or something. I have not
Oh
used them.
man, I don't even
Not
have
one-
an
not
account.
one- not one
Come
time.
at me. Never
That's
had
great.
an account.
That's great. That's great.
But I like
Yeah,
to cook, whatever.
But I'm saying that entire rigmarole of using third-party places to order food, to sit there and eat it out of containers, like, it's bad environmentally. The food comes cold half the time. It's not how it's supposed to be presented. You're by yourself. I just dislike it.
Well, there's a whole culture in India, and I've only seen this on TV, but a culture of delivery food, but they use like real metal, and they pick up all the dishware and they deliver them to offices. So if you have an office of 30 people, some guy will come by in a moped and have like this delicious meal for you. That's all stacked tins. It's really cool looking. And then an hour later, they'll come by and take everything away. And they do that every day. And everyone just eats in front of their computer. But I think there's a charm to that too. And I don't know.
In suburban areas of America, I've seen a few stories about, and I mean, I've seen it in front of me as well, but the older people don't have local restaurants to congregate in anymore because they've all been shut down. So they're sitting around in McDonald's all day, or maybe like a Dunkin' Donuts or something. Yeah. And I think humans have a fundamental need to congregate. And maybe that's part of the appeal of sports, besides the outlet of rage and hatred towards guys who don't take corner threes. Part of it is the need to be around other people and to communicate with them. And you can do that at a McDonald's, and you can do that at a small local restaurant, and you're getting the same thing from both to an extent, I guess.
Yeah, and sports isn't for everybody, and eating in restaurants is not for everybody. But if it is for you, I think, and if you can afford it, the time or the money, it's awesome. I love both those things. And it's funny that what you said about sports, because I really, when I was young, I recognized my disadvantage, like making friends. I was short and Asian. I look weird. And I was weird. And I realized if I started talking about things my friends cared about.
You also have horrible takes. And I think that's stood in the way of meaningful friendships for you for as long as I've known you. And this show has existed.
Like Klay Thompson is kind of good.
That's exactly the point.
But
just yeah. I don't know, the kind of terrible take that pushes people away who could otherwise be friends.
I don't care about winning or losing. But to bring it back, I think, man, I don't know. Like I don't prescribe to the idea of all rich people being lonely, all people who live alone being lonely. Like, this is all such weird stuff, and a lot of it is a built-in like personality thing that you were born with, and it's hard to accuse or label someone else as lonely when they're like, I'm fine, man, don't worry about me, which is the ultimate like Gen Z thing, right? It's just like, oh yeah, you don't like what I do, just leave me alone. Which I think is kind of cool.
There are a lot of negative health risks associated with loneliness.
Oh my God, it's a killer.
But there are also things that are difficult to separate from the habits that like make you lonely or make you someone who is by themselves, or the habits that come along with that. Like, there's so many of these things where you're like, well, teams with, this trait typically have like a good defense because they have a good rim protecting center. And you're like, okay, that's a person that you can identify. When it's like loneliness, there's a lot of moving parts that are not, say, as simple as that. It's more like saying, why doesn't our offense work? I don't know. I'm trying to make it about basketball, but
no, I mean, basketball is just a really useful simulation of like whatever, But you're right, and I don't know. Are we really staring at Randall's, Ben? Is our room really that dirty?
That's what I'm saying. Can you be happy when you're staring at Randall's? And the answer, as we've seen thus far this year, is absolutely not.
No,
everyone who is staring at Randall's is unhappy.
I am totally okay, man. I'm staring at Randall's right now, and I feel okay. I wouldn't say happy. I wouldn't say sad. It's just Randall's, man.
Let's let's leave on that very positive, wise Gen X note.
Wow, we got kind of wistful, man. Your nightmare.
Way too much whist. Next week, no whist on cookies.
It's hard hitting takes.
Only takes. Cookies.
Cookies.